Will this picture help win the war? That's the order masquerading as a question that the US government poses to Hollywood in the summer of 1942. So is Hollywood little more than a government propaganda department, or is there more to it than that? I'm Spartacus Olsson, and welcome to a World War II in real-time special on Hollywood and war propaganda. At least until 1940, it would be fair to answer my question with a firm no. Hollywood largely avoids commenting on events in Europe, even as the continent spirals towards war in the 30s. The first to take exception are the Hollywood Anti-Nazi League, HANL, formed in 1936 as a communist front by Otto Katz, a Czech agent of the Soviet Union. Katz poses as a swaggering anti-Nazi fighter, and the League draws funding, participation from actors, producers, and writers across the political spectrum. HANL publish a newspaper, host a weekly radio show, and campaign for a boycott of German goods. They blockade meetings of the Los Angeles chapter of the pro-Nazi German American Bund, and protest loudly when Mussolini's son Vittorio visits Los Angeles in September 1937. In adverts taken out in the trade press, they referred to his service in the Italian Royal Air Force. Vittorio Mussolini arrives in Hollywood, the first fascist aviator to bomb helpless Ethiopians. Those who welcome him are opening their arms to a friend of Hitler and an enemy of democracy. The following November, they protest the visit of Hitler's filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl, urging Hollywood to close its doors to all Nazi agents. They actually see some success there. The New York Times reports that Riefenstahl's efforts to meet industry leaders are rebuffed, and several film columnists also write highly critical articles about her. In response, Riefenstahl issues a statement denying that she is a Nazi agent, claiming, "I never held an official position in Germany. I am an independent artist." You can watch our bio on her to decide whether that claim is genuine or not. HANL also tries to persuade studios to produce an anti-Nazi film, but here they are blocked by the restrictions of the Code. The Code is a set of self-censoring guidelines that Hollywood put in place after the Catholic Church threatened a boycott in 1934. Not only does it regulate depictions of sexual and violent matters, but also domestic and international politics. Filmmakers are advised to avoid picturizing in an unfavorable light another country's religion, history, institutions, prominent people, and citizenry. Technically, these are only guidelines, but in practice, productions which run afoul are blocked by the enforcers at the Production Code Administration, PCA. HANL never find a way around the code. It scarcely matters anyway, because their opposition to Nazism goes only as far as is ordered by Comintern. HANL will disband in August 1939 with the signing of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. The Comintern instructs communists around the world to not oppose Nazism. Outside of HANL, there are others who are trying to get films made. In June 1938, the Jewish independent filmmaker Walter Wanger submits the script for Personal History to the PCA. It follows a student reporter who discovers the horrors of Francoism and Nazism while traveling through Spain and Germany. Immediately, Wanger runs into difficulty. Large sections of the industry believe that anti-Nazism is just Jews and communists stirring up trouble. The head of the PCA, Joseph Breen, is most certainly of such opinions. He's an avid anti-Semite. In 1932, he writes to a Jesuit priest that these Jews seem to think of nothing but money-making and sexual indulgence, adding that they are the scum of the earth and dirty lice. Later the same year, he confirms these opinions in another letter to the priest Martin J. Quigley, writing that these damn Jews are a dirty, filthy lot. After reading Wanger's script, he claims that although the film may technically be within the code, inevitable difficulties would be caused by what he calls pro-Jewish propaganda and anti-Nazi propaganda. Clearly, Understanding what Breen is threatening with, the strong opposition by the PCA, Wanger quietly drops the production, citing casting difficulties. Still, others are picking up where he left off. Milton Krims, a writer working for Warner Brothers, has completed the script for Confessions of a Nazi Spy by December 1938. To evade the PCA's tentacles, Warner have based the work on the trial and conviction earlier that month of 3 German spies in New York. Even Breen cannot justify censorship of legal fact. So he tries to block the film's production by asking Warner whether they are willing to take the commercial risk of having their film censored in Germany, Spain, and Italy. Apparently they are. You see, Jack and Harry Warner, the founders of Warner Brothers, are the only studio owners who have consistently opposed the idea of staying clear of being openly critical of the Nazis. They are themselves sons of a family fleeing anti-Semitism already before the Nazis seized power. So it's personal. They have even taken their concerns directly to Washington and lobbied Congress and the president to put an end to Hitler's rise to power. In 1937, they released the anti-fascist documentary-style drama Black Legion, starring Humphrey Bogart. Although not an anti-Nazi film per se, it defies PCA control by being overtly political. It is a cautionary tale of fascists threatening to take control of the U.S. Now, Confessions goes a step further by directly targeting German Nazism and getting involved in foreign policy. The film is released in May 1939. It follows an FBI agent, Edward Renard, who uncovers a plot by German spies and the German-American Bund to steal U.S. military secrets and bombard the country with Nazi propaganda. It performs unremarkably at the box office and receives mixed reviews, but it is significant in its unambiguous message. With the spies arrested and charged, Renard warns that neutral America is already at war. It's a new kind of war, but it's still war. As the Nazis flattened Western Europe in the summer of 1940, more interventionist works appear. This is reflective of public opinion. By September, polling shows that 52% are in favor of helping Britain, even if that means an intervention. 52% may not sound much, but it's significantly higher than the 35% who responded as such in June. That same month, 70% support FDR enacting the first peacetime draft. Against this backdrop, Charlie Chaplin writes his great satirical depiction of Hitler, the Great Dictator. Chaplin plays the role of both Adenoid Hinkel, dictator of the fictional Central European nation Tomania, and of a Jewish barber imprisoned in one of Heinkel's concentration camps. While Hinkel argues with his ally Benzino Napoleoni over whose armies will invade their smaller neighbor Austerlitz, the barber escapes the camp. He disguises himself in a military uniform and is mistaken for Hinkel. Forced on stage to give an address, the barber makes out as if Hinkel has had a change of heart. He gives a rousing speech calling for universal brotherhood, concluding with the words, "Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite." The crowd erupts in cheers. Breen actually has little problem with the whole film, most likely because it's less about the Jews and rather a universal message against authoritarianism. He comments, "It is superb entertainment and marks Mr. Chaplin as I think our greatest artist." It's released in October to rapturous reception. The New York Times calls it perhaps the most significant film ever produced. As FDR inches America towards war, Hollywood cooperates with the armed forces to produce pictures glamorizing the military. The government barely needs to lean on them to do this. The public clearly wants military films. Working with the forces gives filmmakers access to military resources that would be impossible to use otherwise. One film, Fight Command, is released in December 1940, with the Navy lending a squadron of biplanes and allowing filming of USS Enterprise. Likewise, the Army Air Force lent training aircraft and even B-17s for production of another film, I Wanted Wings. At the Academy Award banquet in February 1941, Roosevelt thanks Hollywood for its splendid cooperation with all who are directing the expansion of our defense forces. The high point of this cozy relationship is Sergeant York, which premieres in July 1941. It's based around the life of a World War I Medal of Honor recipient, Alvin C. York, played by the great Gary Cooper. Initially claiming conscientious objector status on religious ground, York decides that he must fight for civilization. He serves with distinction in France, capturing a huge number of Germans, and returns an honored yet humble hero. For its premiere, the Astor Theater in New York is adorned with a 4-story caricature of York made of red, white, and blue light bulbs. The real Sergeant York marches down Broadway with a guard of honor of World War I veterans and even gets an audience with the president. The film will still be running in December when Pearl Harbor happens, and there will be reports of men leaving the film and going straight to recruiting offices. So we've seen how the industry moved from isolationism to interventionism and to voluntary production of propaganda. What happens once America goes to war? On December 18th, the president names Lowell Mellett as coordinator of motion pictures affair. Mellett is a former journalist and head of the Office of Government Reports, OGR, which is soon to become part of the Office of War Information, OWI. His job is to consult and advise the industry. The government suggests the basic themes for Hollywood to focus on: 1. Why is America fighting? 2. Who is the enemy and what is the ideology? 3. The Allies and the United Nations. 4. War production. 5. The home front. 6. The fighting forces of the U.S. and allies. Again, this won't be a case of the government dictating to Hollywood. The War Department is urging a takeover, but Mellett believes that would antagonize the industry and be counterproductive. In January 1942, he promises to respect studios' commercial interests. In response, the industry establishes the War Activities Committee, made up of producers, cinema owners, distributors, actors, and labor unions. But Hollywood's early efforts don't please OWI at all. 1942 brings a slew of simplistic, racist depictions of Japan. OWI decries 20th Century Fox film Secret Agent of Japan as hocus pocus. They complain that despite their instructions to examine the enemy's ideology and motives, the film is nothing more than a simplistic depiction of Japanese soldiers as barbarians. Others are confused about the story they are trying to tell. The film Remember Pearl Harbor strangely spends most of its time dealing with Japanese spies in the Philippines. OWI dismiss it as totally unrealistic and quite devoid of any merit. OWI know from the experience of World War I that hate propaganda is counterproductive. In June 1942, they take action. Mellett's deputy, Nelson Pointer, issues a manual for the motion picture industry. Films must delve into the real issues of the war. OWI want the people informed that they are fighting for the ideals of American democracy and freedom. Significantly, the manual affects films that don't even appear related to the war effort. MGM's Man on America's Conscience is an attempt to rehabilitate the memory of Andrew Johnson, Democratic president from 1865 to 1869, who had opposed Republican efforts to overturn racially discriminatory legislation in the South. When Mellett and Pointer become aware of the script during production in August, they urge MGM to make changes. In normal times, it's unlikely that they would care about the reframing of a reactionary former president. But the film could threaten race relations on the home front, especially when many Black Americans are already skeptical about OWI's narrative of American democracy and freedom. In August, Mellett discusses the script with Walter White, Executive Secretary of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NCAAP. White agrees that the film's implicit approval of white supremacy would do enormous injury to Black morale. At Mellett's insistence, the studio deletes some references to slavery. They also paint Johnson's Republican opponents in a more positive light. Released in December as Tennessee Johnson, it remains a historically inaccurate whitewash. But Mellett and OWI are satisfied with the compromise. They instruct White to withdraw his opposition to keep the studios onside. But that's not the end. In December, Mellett advises all studios to send their scripts for review so OWI can make suggestions as to the war content. The industry is aghast. Man on America's Conscience had nothing to do with the war, yet it had been modified for falling afoul of OWI's narrative. Variety magazine's headline proclaims, "Censors sharpen axes." William Guts, running 20th Century Fox, claims that Mellett wants control over the policy and content of our pictures. That reaction might seem a bit much. Mellett doesn't have any power beyond suggestions, and he compromised with MGM. This isn't Nazi Germany with Goebbels making personal adjustments to script with his green ink. But how far off is it? Mellett's suggestions are backed by the might of the US federal government. So they're not just really suggestions, or are they? I'll leave it up to you. To help yourself answer that question, you might want to check out how film propaganda is done in Germany, a country where the government has near complete control. Check out our video on Goebbels and the German film industry here. To get ever more content like this, join the Time Ghost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. Never forget.